Hey everybody, welcome to Edbeat. Did you like the fancy little animated thing I made, Patrick?
Yeah, the very ringtone feel to that. I'm digging
You
it.
know, it's the story of my life is a ringtone pretty much these days. So welcome everybody. This is Edbeat and Patrick and I, this is, what is this, Patrick? This is episode 26 you have just enlightened
26
me.
big ones.
Woo! We're going to take a break for the holidays because, even though education coverage never stops, we still too want to enjoy our family and friends over the holiday season. So this is the big one for the year.
That's right. And as soon as the camera stops rolling, we start a wassailing.
I have to. What is wassailing really? And I never did remember that. Okay, so
Drinking.
yeah. Oh, where's my my tea? Man. Okay, we're gonna have to do this hardcore, old-fashioned way with no tea or liquids. We can do this.
I believe in you.
You are so not hardcore. All right, Patrick. So it is the end of the year. There's been a lot going on. Christmas has not happened yet as of the taping of this episode, but man, we just had a huge budget passed with a big chunk of money for education. You've been covering a lot of different issues. Money toward education is one of those things. So, in spite of the fact that we may have many things on our agenda to speak of, any sort of big takeaways from the passage of the budget and what that looks like for education?
Yes. So I've done a series of stories. I've done 4 stories on the education budget. We've done a general overview, and then we've analyzed a couple of the bigger ticket line items and new programs. So kind of the top headline number is $384 million. That's how much the Cayman Islands government is giving to the Ministry of Education to spend over the next 2 years. So it's about $190 million a year, or you could to 200 million if you could find other items in the budget related to education. So as usual, education is the single biggest area of funding for the public sector. It's more, healthcare would be second, and then you go down to the other various responsibilities. In terms of overall spending in the education budget, the top item is $75 million that are earmarked for capital projects. So that's, in layman's terms, that's construction. And of course, the biggest project is the new John Gray High School. And then there's other expansions and buildings at other schools, including at a couple of the primary schools where they want to build new classroom blocks to accommodate a new nursery program, which would be, say, for like 3-year-olds. A few years ago, the government expanded to reception. So they went down, this used to start at year 1. Then they started reception, which is about, kids who are 4 and 5. And then now they want to add on public nursery for 3 and 4. But, as if you've been following our coverage, you'll see that some of the schools can't physically accommodate more students or just don't have the appropriate number of classrooms. So you have to build it if you want the kids to come. And there's also going to be a new building at Lehman Scott High School on the BRAC.
So it's been a bit since I've been to the BRAC. Frankly, I haven't traveled much in the past couple of years, but last I went, you could see it was bursting at the seams a bit. So it does make sense to do, although the population is fairly small. Academically, the kids do great, and I could see it. I could say, yeah, they could use some room here and there. The primary school, the preschool programs, it's really an interesting concept from my perspective, because there's this idea for me that government has certain responsibilities that it is supposed to take on or is mandated to take on, and then others that I'm not sure about. And this is not me making judgment on it, by the way. It just private sector has traditionally handled that component of preschool education. And so it's interesting to me that the choice would be to take this on as opposed to perhaps, providing vouchers, et cetera, for people to use private preschools. So it's just an interesting choice. And I'd be interested in learning more about why that choice was made. Are there efficiencies, or is it For me, any new project comes with new complications, right? And so having to manage even more people and even more programs does seem a lot. So I definitely would be interested in finding out, why. Is it necessary? How's it going to work?
Yeah, and it's kind of an overarching issue throughout all the years of education is with as instead of invest, do you have choices, right? Like, are you going to keep investing in new buildings or buildings that need updating? Do you keep increasing your annual operation spend on the public school system? But Cayman has such a robust private sector.
Hmm.
Does it make sense to outsource some of
Yeah.
these functions through vouchers, or even making direct contributions to schools, funding directly from the public, which is which is something they actually are doing in the new budget. And people talk a lot about it, how private schools get government funding. um, it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money compared to the huge bucket. So it's really a drop in the bucket. So if you have $190 million budget annual spend on education, um, the private schools have typically gotten. I did an analysis on this, which is why I know. Uh, private schools have historically gotten about $1 million a year. Um, and then in the waning years of the Progressives administration, they started cutting it down from 1 million to 500,000 to 250,000. And then in 2020, it was supposed to be zeroed out. So the private schools were on their own. Um, but then COVID hit. So
Yeah, which
since
is kind of
COVID hit,
impacted everything.
they've increased it. So the private schools, these are it's a grant program going to 19 different private schools. So for this current year, they're distributing $1 million to the schools total, and then over the next 2 years, it'll be $2 million per year. So they're doubling that. Um, and what's interesting to me is each school gets about $50,000 this year and about $100,000 next year, and that's regardless of the number of students that are in the
Hmm.
schools.
That's
So let's
interesting.
say a smaller school like Cayman Learning Center, which has 1 to 25, they give you ranges, right? So they have 25 or fewer students in primary and secondary level. Uh, they get the same amount of money as Cayman International School, which has 600 to 1,100 students
Mm.
in primary and secondary. Um, I don't know why that's done, but that's
Yeah.
how they have the purchase agreements outlined. Um, and then there's another bucket of funding that could potentially go to private schools, and it's called the private and public school grants. And so this is a pool of money that schools, either government or private sector, can apply for funding if they're holding an event or if they have an initiative or a program or project that they need funding for. So this year they're spending $380,000 on it, but they're bumping that to $1.4 million per year in the next 2 years. So that's just uh, some of the new programs they have, or enhanced programs they have in the education budget. The other big ticket item is it's a bigger ticket, and this is the school lunch program.
Mm.
Um,
Yes.
so so the government's estimating that it's going to spend more than $25 million on the school meals program um, this semester and then the next 2 years. So for 2.5 years, 25 million. And that amount is going to grow as they bring on, because right now it's only in the primary schools,
Hmm.
and they're going to add in the secondary schools, which effectively doubles it. So when it's up and running in full in the year 2023, $15 million a year. And and I think it's of interest how they've decided, because there was a question for me, like, how are you going to allocate the funding for these meals? Because there's no such
Right.
thing as free lunch, uh, and a variety of vendors. There's kind of a patchwork, or you could say organic or patchwork approach to
Hmm.
running school canteens.
Yeah.
Sometimes the PTAs just handled it themselves. Other times, they just contract it out. to vindicate, like say Mise en Place
Mhm.
has really focused on this for the past in a number of years, and is the company that provides the most meals to the most number of schools, for example. Um, so what the government has done is they have separate purchase agreements with each entity that serves each school. So some of these agreements are with a company, and some are with the PTA group. And what they've done is they've set kind of a ceiling. So Mise en Place serves about 2,000, will serve about 2,000 students. Um, so they can charge uh, up to, I'm looking at my notes, like 5.8 million or something. But and then whereas the smallest vendor is a company called Paradise that is on the BRAC, and they're serving like 70 students. So their ceiling's like 230,000.
Right.
Um, and I checked this with using the powers of division, and every company is getting paid about the same amount per student. And so
Oh,
what they
okay.
do is they say each this is the maximum amount of money that you can get now, and then the vendors will bill. I think it's on a every 2 week basis or something. And so they say, listen, we served uh, 500 breakfasts, 500 lunches, and 1,000 snacks, and 2,000 drinks. And then there's a dollar amount associated with a breakfast, a lunch, and a drink. So they only get paid for the actual food and that they provide.
Interesting.
Um, and then also in the what's interesting for me with the government budget is just overall, stepping way out, is the budget keeps increasing. Year after year after year. I think for the past 10 years. So next year's budget is going to increase by 6% over the previous year, and then the next year it's going to increase another 7%. Um, but they're serving the same number of students,
Hmm.
so they anticipate they're going to serve the same number. The school system itself isn't growing; they're spending more per student.
Oh, I
And
see. Yeah.
right now, the Ministry of Education has 968 full-time equivalent employees. So it's the largest. It's one of the largest single areas of government, as you might expect. Um, by so in 2023, they want to increase the headcount by 11%.
Okay.
So they're going to increase staff by another 11% in 2023. That's what they project. So it's easy to see where the increased operating expenses go, and then when you combine that with the construction projects going on, this is why spending on education is going up.
So you've kind of broken down the, where it's going and why, and of course some of the questions that will end up getting asked as we go along here, particularly because this is what the auditor generals do. It's a lot about value for money, but I imagine it is challenging to question funds spent on education, right? Because even if you said to me it's the same amount of students, but we're having more teachers or more support staff,
Mm-hmm.
politically speaking, I'll argue all day long. You can say to me, "We're spending more," and I'll be like, "Yep, we are. That's good. Good for me. Good for me if I was running for office," because it's in theory what you're doing is spending more to make it better for each student. And so this is the hardest case to make for your overspending on education, right? I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
even see how you can criticize it and get away with it.
But Jim Urquhart said in an interview, and I didn't use the quote, but it's good. He said, "If you think education's expensive, try ignorance."
I love that quote. Yeah, it's one of the best. It's one of my favorites.
And
But
so I
I
guess that
still,
brings us to, I hope it's present for me, because this is when it came out last year. The annual education data report comes out,
Mhm.
and they really have all the information. So they have information on testing and on in at the primary level, at the secondary level, all the head counts, all the numbers that you would want for the public schools. A lot of that information isn't available for the private schools,
Right.
even though in the spring they said they were going to try to get private schools to share more of this information. So I'm excited to see what comes out in the data report. And I guess it'll become like an annual tradition at the beginning of the year. Starts off with a series of analyses on what's in the education data report.
Yeah, I mean,
But
it
I'm
gives us an idea of.
super excited about.
It's a Christmas present for me. I know he can't wait. No, I think it's always good to look at and see kind of where we are, right? Um, and I don't know if there's more you wanted to talk about on this subject, but I do not want to forget to mention, because I kept disappearing from the live streams and trying to pop in, because both of the high school graduations happened in the same week, a couple of days apart, and so I was helping with some live streaming stuff on that, and it was a challenge because it was kind of a last minute thing. There was a conflict with Parliament going on at the same time, so I was definitely in the throes of plugging cables in and trying to figure out where the internet was coming on. So I spent a bit of time, and it was so okay. That part was stressful, but it was really interesting to hear the principals from both schools and the students from both schools. I mean, there's always a kind of energy and excitement about graduation, right? Always. And because I was a little bit behind the scenes, I could see some of the dynamic between the schools, the students who were graduating and their teachers, and some students had been away and came back for graduation. So it was really a lovely experience from an just kind of emotional human observance perspective. But when you see the sheer numbers of students who are graduating at one point, in time, it gives you a sense of the magnitude of the work that's being done in these two schools. I mean, we're quick to criticize and beat people up, and I get that, but man, that's a lot of students with a lot of individual needs, a lot of tests to take, a lot of stuff to grade. And, both of the principals were really, I think, you could see them. They were touched at the success of some of the students and their test scores, as particularly with some of the challenges they faced in the past, year and a half, 2 years here.
Yeah, and for those of us who weren't lucky enough to be crawling through the air ducts and acting like Chewbacca on the Millennium Falcon trying to make things work.
There was wires flying everywhere. Good times, good times.
So the Cayman Current has compiled everything in one place for everybody who wants to check in on the three public secondary school graduations. So it's funny. So now the organization's about a little over a year old now. So now I'm running into like seasonal and quarterly and annual stories. So it's like a lazy way of what did I do last year? And I thought it worked well last year. So I did. I've done 3 individual stories based on press releases and videos that were sent out on. So I've done one for each of the schools, but then I do a summary story. So you have Clifton Hunter, John Gray, Layman Scott. There's a summary of what went on in the ceremony, who the top students were. We've got photo gallery from it.
I love this photo that I pulled up here too, right? Because when you look at this, you can actually see, it's a huge gym. Parents weren't allowed. Teachers, for the most part, weren't allowed. Really, it was the graduating class. So this particular photo, and I think I don't have my glasses on, but I think it was Scott Swing's photo. I feel like it really captures the essence of what it was like for the students at John Gray. And as you've said, there's videos posted. You've got something. I mean, this is one of the fundamentals for me of education coverage. It's just looking at students as they make their way through that process. It's pretty cool. And of course, here's your ever-present, please donate to the Cayman Current, which I quite like.
Oh, that's sign up for the mailing list.
That's right. Donate. It's good.
Yeah.
So,
donate.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to point out that photo for me really gave a true sense of, the impact COVID has had on the way we even celebrate some of these milestones in our lives.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was like while they were rolling out the press releases on the graduations, they had a kind of a statement from the department, directly from Mark Ray, who was kind of trying to explain why parents and family members, and it wasn't, they weren't able to gather. So, just, I didn't really highlight it on the website.
Yeah,
Um,
I did.
but
I meant to do more on that as well because I think that because of this, I don't think we are sometimes forgetting that look, we still have restrictions and there are still crowd limits, and even though this is a huge occasion, there we're still following some rules.
yeah, and so just I just kind of point that out now because say like Mark and DES, they did realize that this did have an impact, and there were questions, and people, it did bother some people, I
Yeah,
suppose.
of
So
course.
they did take the time to acknowledge those concerns and say, hey, social gathering limits, we had to abide by them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that said, that it was still a lovely, lovely event. And if you read Patrick's articles, you can see some of the performance components for the students. That you were able to highlight kind of some of the successes of the students in terms of their regional tests and in general how they're doing. But I admit that just the fact that there's so many students graduating at one time, two different schools, same week. I didn't even get to the BRAC one yet. It was a milestone, if you will. And this ceremony usually happens a bit earlier in the year, but because of the way the exam results rolled out, it kind of had an impact on everything else. Sort of a cascading effect. We can only hope that next year will be a more normal year. But one of the students in there, actually both of the keynote speaker students at both schools, they did touch on the fact that they felt that as a result of their experience with going to school and COVID and doing the testing with COVID and all that stuff, that it did promote greater resiliency for them. They felt like, in many respects, it was a big test for them, but a test that they feel they passed with flying colors. They didn't say that. I like that cliche is my favorite, so. But they did well, and so that was kind of a nice moment to see as well.
Yeah. So congratulations to all the graduates. It's a big deal. It's your first step into a larger world.
Yes,
That's
man.
another Star Wars. It's Christmas.
Chewbacca. It's
It's Star
Christmas.
Wars season.
Yay. Okay, so I know
Moving
we have
on.
some more things to talk about as well, but I wanted to make sure that we take a moment and toss to the. See, so Patrick, I forgot the name of the segment. Was it Principal's Corner, Principal Spotlight, Talk to the
Principally
Principal,
speaking,
Principally Speaking? I make things up as I go along.
or principal's update.
Yeah, Principal's Update. So what I'm going to do right quick here is toss to Patrick's interview because I was supposed to be there, but I was running around and having trouble with the internet that day. I tried really hard. I popped in, I disappeared. So hopefully none of that will make it in the final version. But let's throw it to Patrick's interview now. And wait, Patrick, shouldn't you set this up before I hit this magic button?
Sure. Yeah, we this week we interviewed Nicola Williams, who's the owner and director of Sprague's Garden Preschool and Play School, Sprague's Garden Play School, which is on Crew Road near the intersection of South Church and South Sound Road. And she's also the president of the Cayman Islands. I'm doing this off the top of my head. Cayman Islands Early Childhood Association, which is kind of the association of preschools. So she gives us both kind of says what's going on at Sprague's, and she focuses on the COVID situation and COVID testing, and then she gives a higher level perspective on what the conversations they're having generally with the preschools.
So now you get to say, roll the beautiful bean footage.
I rolled up beautiful bean footage, April. This is Patrick Brindell from the Cayman Current, and I'm being joined by our special guest, Nicola Williams, who's the owner and director of Sprague's Garden Play School. And in case anybody's looking for April Cummings, I assure you she will be on the show today. She is en route, and she's WhatsApping me as we speak with an ETA of 7 to 10 minutes. So Nicola is here as part of the principal's appearances that we're trying to make a regular feature of Edbeat, and she's going to give us an update on things that are going on at her school, and then she's going to give us kind of a more generalized perspective because in addition to running Sprague's, Nicola is also the president of the Cayman Islands Early Childhood Association. Hi, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. And thank you for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for hearing. So we talked a little bit before we started rolling the cameras, and I think the main topic that's probably on a lot of people's minds in the schools is the COVID situation and how that's going. So could you talk a little bit about how things are going at Sprague's with COVID?
Yeah, obviously, when everything first started, sort of becoming more and more of an issue as there were more cases of community spread, it was really challenging. The ministry's been really great in supporting us. I think that when the shift went over to using the lateral flow test, that really helped as far as being able to. Otherwise, it would have been so many children and families quarantining. I don't think we would have been able to continue, and teachers as well, been able to continue operating. So the lateral flow test really helped. We feel very lucky that we did well with the number of cases. We had 2 teachers and 2 children, 3 children with COVID. So we feel very lucky about that. And now that the restrictions have changed, or the requirements have changed again to the twice weekly random testing, and children 2 and under are not being tested using lateral flows. And so that's for children under 5 and above the age of 2.
I guess before you start, I don't think a lot of the people in the public have been aware of this change, because to my knowledge, it wasn't announced in a press conference or widely or in documentation that I could find. But I was aware of it because I'm a parent of a child who's at nursery age at another school. So just to clarify to people, is for the older kids, and what had been the case for some of the younger kids, is basically if a child tested positive in a classroom, then the other member or a teacher, then the other members of that classroom would have to undergo the 10 days of lateral flow testing. And then, of course, if any of the other kids in the class tested positive for COVID, that 10-day period gets restarted. And so that's still the case for children 5 and over. But for children under 5, the regulations have changed. So now these youngest go. So now the kids from 3 and 4 years old, they participate in they call it the surveillance testing. So 2 times a week, they take a lateral flow test. And if they test positive, they don't go to school, but the classmates continue to go to school. They don't do the 10-day lateral flow testing. They just continue with the twice weekly surveillance.
But the teachers test. So if the teachers are primary contacts or have a child in their class, then the teachers test for the 10 days if they're vaccinated. So that's changed a little bit that way. So it's only just the surveillance testing for children above 2 and below 5.
And then the children 2 and under aren't being tested at all. They're too young.
No.
So so sorry to interrupt, but I think I just wanted to make sure that was clear for folks.
Yeah. And so for us, really, it's been just taking all the precautions and following the recommendations and guidelines and requirements of public health as far as mask wearing goes. We have a really nice garden at our preschool. We're spending way more time outside, which is really great too, because the weather's changed and it's a lot cooler. And so we know that COVID is less likely to spread outside. So we're really making use of our garden space, and the children are really enjoying that as well. And then just keeping our groups as separate as we can as well. And so I'm really grateful to my teachers too. They've done an incredible job of caring for the children and nurturing them, and through all of this, and giving them, because our teachers, and especially with very young children, 1 and 2 year olds, very close care is required. The children need and deserve it. And obviously children are not vaccinated. And so I'm impressed with how my teachers have maintained the amazing high quality care of the children, and how, through this stressful time, they've continued to do a really good job for the children and for our families too. And reassuring families as well is a big part of it for me too. Parents worry about children who may have had time at home and the isolation factor. But I like to reassure parents that, one, children are very resilient. And if they get that attention, it's all about having these interactions with an interested, caring adult. And if they get that at home, then and it's shorter periods of time now. And they return to school. They're very resilient. They soak back up everything, the relationships and their bonds with their caregivers and so on. So the most important thing really for them is about stress. They're very sensitive, especially young children, to the stress around them. And so that's the important thing, is to remain, calm around the children and reassuring and those kinds of things.
And we had talked a little bit about kind of the differences or the things that in relation to COVID that maybe parents should think about differently when we're talking about the young children in the nursery and preschool, as opposed to, say, a 13 or 14-year-old who's preparing for relatively high stakes testing. So I guess, what's the most important thing to think about when you're dealing with a young child and in this COVID situation and possible quarantine requirements?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing, children, very young children, the two primary things that they need are attachment, interaction, and exploration. And they form really strong bonds with their caregivers, and especially obviously with their parents. They have their strong attachments, but they also have strong bonds with their caregivers. And when those bonds are disrupted, we want to try and do what we can to keep that relationship going for them. And so when they return really to school, in earlier settings, the most important thing is to give them back that interaction, the social interaction, the language-rich interaction, the opportunities for play and exploration. And it's very difficult to give children those things through any kind of online, or at least not in any way to the same degree, versus using any kind of online platform or worksheets or work to be sent home. Especially during the lockdowns, I was very aware of the fact that many of our parents, people who were lucky enough to keep their jobs through it, also were expected to look after very young children and work. And I didn't want to add to their pressure by saying, oh, you need to do this activity with your child, or you need to do that. So our primary focus was the bond, keeping that bond going between teachers and children, and giving parents it as an option, but reassuring them that it's not necessary. This is just something, activities. And it was mostly connected with Zoom circles my teachers were doing, and WhatsApp calls with individual children that children could sign up for, and those kinds of things. So it's really about that. Yeah, it's really about that. The social interaction, the maintaining the bonds, and the play and exploration, and the community. They've lost their community, which they're very attached to as well. But it was amazing after the closure. When we returned to school, I was pointing out to my staff and parents, look how resilient these kids are. It was almost like you could see them soaking it up more than they ever have before. They really are extraordinary at figuring out how to get what they need, to promote their own healthy sort of growth and development. They're quite amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't always like being wrong, but in this case, I am glad that I was wrong, because the last time, whenever they started the LFT policy and COVID was racing through the community, I was placing bets, not literally, but I was pretty sure that the Christmas break was going to get moved up a week or 2 or 3, like last year, just extended. But thankfully, it looks like I'm wrong. We've got about a week to go till the public schools close, and that's usually the benchmark for everybody else. So in terms of the Cayman Islands Early Childhood Association, which you're president of, one of the things that we've written about and talked about is how literacy is for everyone, or as most people call it, life. They had branched out their mandates and programs and been reaching into the preschools to promote these pre-literacy programs. And I know the Early Childhood Association was a big part of that. Could you tell me about that program and what the status of it is?
Yeah, so partnering with, that's been a big focus of the Cayman Islands Early Childhood Association over the past year, is partnering with other organizations in the community who are also doing amazing things for young children and their families. And Life had more focused on more older children, elementary, especially elementary age children. And then Juliet Austin and myself met, and she's just amazing, and Erica there too. Life is doing great things, and they were interested in branching out into early childhood. And they're very educated, knowledgeable, driven, passionate, professionals. And so this Thrive by 5 early literacy program was sort of, this initiative was started with Deloitte being the sponsor for it. And it's an early literacy program. It's a professional training program. that also incorporates giving resources, so in the form of books, to preschools, and then also giving books to families. And it's sort of a bit of a train the trainer model where we teach the teachers through professional learning, and then they also share that new learning with their families. So we started the program through a series of professional workshops, and then we switched to Zoom. But then we're piloting it in one preschool, and we've now decided to postpone until January just because of everything that's going on. We know that, and I know firsthand that preschools are trying to get through this time, and it's we want to get them. We want the most from this program because it is such an incredible opportunity, and the teachers were amazing too, really engaged and excited about it. So we want to wait until we can focus in more on this, and let's hope that some of the stressors that we've been experiencing have been alleviated in January. So that's a really exciting initiative. And then the association, all of our meetings have gone to Zoom. But last meeting, our monthly meeting for November, it was an open forum. It was really great for all early childhood practitioners, directors, all of our members to just talk about COVID-19, the implications for it, things that they're doing, questions that they have. It was actually really great. We had a big attendance, and it was just really nice to be able to talk to other people that are going through the same things and what strategies they're doing and so on. So yeah, the Cayman Island Association, unfortunately, the meetings have gone to Zoom, which I'm very much a face-to-face person, but we've got to do what we've got to do. So, but still, really, those sessions are going really well, especially our November meeting.
Great. Well, yeah. Well, thanks for appearing on the show. I really appreciate putting yourself out here to this brutal interrogation. But, I think it's important because, I sit in my little office all day and I talk on the phone, and every now and then I make field trips and read reports and things like that. But, in my opinion, the principals and the owners of the schools are really, to me, one of the best perspectives to get on how the education system is working, because you do have a higher level view than, say, strictly within the classroom, but you also are close enough to that so that you know what's going on. And of course, a lot of principals are in the classroom almost on a daily basis, and as a rule, have been classroom teachers themselves. So I think they have, really the best perspective on what's going on. So once again,
it's important to be down in the classrooms. I love to know what's going on and have a frequent presence down there. And I also love to be with the children. So it's hard for me to leave the classrooms because it's just so wonderful to be with children. You want to remember what you're doing and why. And the families have been great through COVID-19 as well. There's been a lot of mutual understanding and about this because it's a difficult time. So it's just, the schools just come together, parents, teachers, and owners, just to get through this time together. And I think it's brought out a lot of good things as well. But yeah, for sure, being on the floor and seeing what's happening with children and teachers and so on is really important, I think, for me to be able to do my job well.
Great. Well, thanks a lot. So once again, if somebody missed the ID, this is Nicola Williams, who's the director and owner of Sprague's Garden Play School, and she's also the president of the Cayman Islands Early Childhood Association. And once again, thanks a lot for appearing on the show, and we'll have to have you on again in the future. And thanks. I know that we've talked a lot about possibly participating in an event coming up and talking about the early literacy programs and things like that. And I assure you and the audience that is really high up on our agenda for next year.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that initiative. Well, and thank you too, Patrick, for all the amazing work you're doing too, keeping everyone informed. It's really important for educators to come together and for the community to be informed about education and discuss issues related to education. So I really appreciate everything you're doing too.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks so much.
Right. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Okay, so we're back, and Patrick, quite an insightful interview.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Patrick's like, I was fantastic.
Many thanks to Nicola for stepping forward and participating, and we're hoping this becomes, continues to be a recurring thing in the new year.
Yeah, it's really great to hear the perspective of the principals as well. So not just the association component, but just, hey, what's going on in your universe? What happens in schools for many of us is behind closed doors, if you will. So it's great to, hear what they're thinking. It just creates a greater, for me, a sense of comfort that we have an idea that it's not just a job somebody's knocking out every day. They're really thinking about where they are, where they're going, and what's going to be best for our kids in the future. All right, so we have some time left. Tell me what we're talking about next.
Well, a couple things. One's a real quick one, and if people will recall, more than 7 months ago, there were some I don't want to say scandalous, but high-profile reports of allegations of alleged misconduct by staff members towards students at Red Bay Primary School. And as we, the standard caveat is we haven't repeated those allegations, et cetera, even though they were reported elsewhere. But kind of every month or two, I check in with the Ministry of Education because of the allegations, they called in the MASH unit, which is the Family Protective Services. What is it? The Department of Children and Family Services and the police formed the MASH unit. So they got involved, and there's a law enforcement investigation. A number of staff were taken out of the school and assigned elsewhere in different roles or whatever. And checked in last Friday, and the investigation is still ongoing. So we'll check in again in another month.
Yeah.
So I guess just to put the timeline on it, the allegations were revealed more than 7 months ago. The long-time principal, Vicki Frederick, is no longer the principal right now, and they've got a man named Ryan Dale, who was the deputy principal and has been deputy principal at other public schools as well. He's been the acting principal since then. And the government won't give us any more information until the investigation is concluded. And the investigation is not concluded; it's still ongoing. So we'll keep our finger on the pulse.
The interesting thing that the media. I'm the media today on this one. You're not the media. I'm the media. There's the media with a short attention span media. So what happens is that you are always gunning after the shiny new story and do not consistently go back and follow up on items like this. And this is where, Patrick, the education-focused media, which you didn't, you would have done this anyway. It's really staying. It will go away if no one asks these questions. So you have to keep following up on it over time. Otherwise, we never really find out what happened, whether there was something wrong or not, whether there's systemic changes that need to be made or not.
Yeah.
And so it is important, I think, to continue to follow up. And that's why 7 months later, Patrick is still checking in to say, hey, where are we? What's going on?
Yeah, and also it's important. Because we do this to be, there's a sense of fairness and transparency and trying to do right. Just, the students, of course, and the parents, but also the staff members and ones who either weren't implicated or the ones who were, whether it turns out that something inappropriate did happen or if it didn't happen, and it was, if the whole thing turns out to be false, it's equally important that truth comes out as if everything that was alleged was true, because it's really bad for somebody if they're falsely accused of something, and then it kind of goes away, and you never get the public exoneration. It can hang over your head forever unless somebody finds that out.
Yeah, and that is one of the important roles, of a journalist, frankly. Okay, so we've touched on Red Bay, and I feel like there was another subject.
There's one more.
I knew there was something else. I was like,
and it's great news. It's the pandemic, but the pandemic isn't so great. But what is great?
How can the pandemic be great news? Wait a minute.
Yeah, I can segue. But what is great is the Cayman Current has had the privilege and the opportunity to publish a series of regional investigative journalism stories on COVID-19 in the region. And as you said, we're laser focused on education. But in this instance, we've broken our own rule. So this doesn't have anything to do with education. But I guess the background on it is there's a nonprofit in Puerto Rico, which is one of the few nonprofit journalism organizations in the Caribbean, besides the current. They're a lot bigger than us, and they've been around a lot longer. And they're a little bit they have a wider scope and mandate and funding than we do. But it's the Center for Investigative Journalism, and in Spanish it's like El Centro de Periodismo Investigativo, the CPI. Yes, taco un taco. So that's my Spanish is all built around ordering tacos.
Your Spanish is built around food, just admit it.
Yeah. So it's this, they call it the CPI. So right. CPI had, they did a seminar and a conference with journalists around the region. One of those lucky journalists was Kayla Young, who has since come on as the Currents journalist, became a Current journalist. So Kayla was one of the reporters who was selected to participate in a series of collaborative investigations where they have teams of reporters from different islands reporting on the two topics they picked is first COVID-19 and second is sustainability. And Kayla is on the sustainability side of it. So this first series coming out about COVID-19 in the region, we're going to be publishing this. And then when Kayla's part of the project comes out, we're going to publish that. And so we published 2 stories so far, and I think they're really good. They got really good visuals, and they have professional photographers, if you can imagine, unlike us. And they kind of surveyed how different territories, including Cayman, responded to COVID-19, how their vaccination rates were going and the vaccination campaigns, and then how that boiled out to different mortality rates in the region. And then the second story focuses on Puerto Rico. And I think it's interesting because they look at excess deaths. So it's like every year you look back at the past 50 years and you can predict just about how many people are expected to die. And then you look at COVID and this number of people died. So they look at not only people who died when they had COVID, but people who died of other reasons. And what they found kind of overall is that some of these reasons like mental health or reasons like suicide, depression, or even things like Alzheimer's disease. And more people are dying from these other causes and I think one of the other ones is cardiovascular disease, than would have been expected in years past. So even these people die from COVID, they died because of the circumstances created by the pandemic and lockdowns and things like that. So it's a really good work.
So if you take for example, the mental health example, or even just the people who were locked in their houses for 6 months or 8 months because of COVID restrictions, there's depression, there's, just sort of all kinds of things that could affect you. Oh, look, but you did it right.
Yeah.
You did the vampire. Sorry. I'm quite amused. I'm gonna go get my flow test and send it to your house just in case, though, right? But
it's going in the microphone.
It's coming through. No, it's not 5G, people. No, I'm kidding. I don't believe that either. Sorry. My sense of humor is going to get me into trouble someday for sure. But just the idea that, back to your main point, with excess deaths, for example. I'm trying to be serious for 5 whole seconds, and then my brain kicks in and diverts me off track again because serious can be sad, but it's also important. So for example, there were mental health issues related to people being in lockdown, right? And so yes, COVID may not have directly caused a death, but depression that is exacerbated by the circumstances around COVID suppression can lead to that. So I think that kind of work that they're doing is important because it again gives us some perspective. Sometimes it's not the thing itself that you have to be concerned about alone. You have to look at overall what's happening and the impact that can have on folks. And if nothing else, it gives us an opportunity. Sorry, I moved my whole set around here. Living room.
Yeah, it gives us. How did the whole room move? It's crazy.
I've got magic skills. But the value in looking at some of this today may not always help us with this particular crisis. or pandemic or whatever. But the knowledge that we glean from that can be helpful for us as we go forward making future decisions during, whatever the next huge crisis may be. Now, pandemic's not over yet, right? But I think you learn
What?
lessons from it. I know, not over yet.
Yeah, they one of the examples, for example, in the story is about the cardiovascular illness, and one doctor who's quoted in there talks about how there was this shift to telemedicine, which is
Mm-hmm.
the doctor's on one side of the screen and you're on the other side
And
of
the
the
other.
screen, and he was saying, like, listen, diagnosing cardiovascular disease and treating it doesn't work with telemedicine. You should be there with your hands on and feeling
Mm-hmm.
pulses, and you need to be there in person. I'm not a doctor. I don't know if he's
I
right or
don't
not,
know.
but
But
that's what he pointed to. This sort of medicine isn't good enough yet for this kind of condition.
and some of it's even just the technology. For example, I mean, look at the range, and if you've been watching Edbeat, I've been experimenting with all kinds of different things: high end cameras, low end cameras, phones, laptops, the different audio sources, and for even without that physical interaction, the lower the quality, the signal, the picture, the sound, the more nuances you start to miss. So if it is that way in just interviewing people and having a conversation online, how much more so you can imagine it would be if you're talking about someone's health. And even I have a friend who's a psychiatrist, and one of the things she was saying was that for her, it was difficult sometimes. She'd be talking to someone, and she's seeing this much of them, but some of the other things that she looks for aren't visible. They were off screen. So it might be someone fidgeting with their feet or, comforting themselves in some fashion, right? She said she couldn't read the whole person the way she would do in person. So not that it was useless, it just created new challenges and things that maybe they hadn't thought about before really, really came, into the spotlight because of this.
Yeah, it's different. Um, I had to do. I came off a knee surgery and was doing physical therapy pretty intensely, multiple times a week when the lockdown happened. And we said, oh, we'll just use telemedicine because we're doing the same stuff. And you use it, but internet connection, sound
Mm-hmm.
delays, software not work. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
Like I did a couple sessions, and then it was just listen, send me what I need to do in writing, and
I'll
I'll
do
do it
my
on my
best.
own. I
Yeah,
promise.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best. So it is one of the reasons to sort of press forward as well with it. Just because something is possible doesn't mean that it's in the best possible form yet for the applications that we would like to use it for. And I can take this also back to a teaching example as well. While many kids um, had internet connections, it didn't mean that those internet connections were of the level they needed to be in order to truly participate in their online classes. They might get the camera going, but then there wasn't quite enough internet to also open the Google document that they need, or whatever it may have been. And so those kinds of things cause delays, and there's a flow sometimes in a classroom, right? Even an online classroom, there's a flow that goes on. And if that is interrupted by all these bits and pieces of things, and I saw it, the teachers can lose focus, the kids lose focus. It becomes more about which button to push sometimes than about that, exciting moment of insight. So not all bad or all good. I saw some problems, and I can see why I can see why doctors would have a challenge with it as well. Okay.
Yeah, I'd say there's like the cutting edge of innovation, and then there's the bleeding edge. And the
Oh,
bleeding edge means you're so far on the cutting edge that there's some issues.
I've got to go Google this after because I should have heard this before. This sounds like a thing that's just for me. So, Patrick,
No, my son who's 9, we were watching Nightmare Before Christmas today, and he had never heard of the Boogeyman. And he's
what?
like, "Come on, Boogeyman! Like I'm gonna have to Google that. BOO. I'm gonna
Oh,
not that kind of boogie." And I thought, where do I fail as a parent that I haven't scared them with the Boogeyman?
I don't know, man. But right now, I'm scaring people because I have just discovered that there are Christmas backgrounds in our program, and so as we wrap things up so that I can let the dogs out of their captivity. I am sharing with people these beautiful Christmas scenes right here behind us. And there's one more. Where'd it go? This is my really favorite here.
Cold.
Oh, winter. Winter's rough. Did I do it? I didn't do it right. I'm so
Turn
disappointed.
front.
There we go. So I am a small child playing with the internet right now, but there's a tree in your way. I gotta go this way. So, all right, any last words before we, go off and do the Christmas things that
Yeah.
need to be done? I have stuff to wrap, even though it's December 12th. I just want you to know I was ahead of the game this year.
Good job. No, just ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. Thanks
What did
for
you tell me? This is an
in the
education
best
show.
possible way.
As it should be. As it should be.
Yeah, no. Thanks for how long have we been doing this now? So 26 months of Edbeat plus.
I have done something for 6 months. That's
Yeah.
impressive.
Well, I just want to note that we started this off as a 10-minute update.
Yeah,
That was
no,
the
we said
idea?
5. We're like, we're going to talk for 5 minutes and then it'll be done. It's
Yeah,
quick. We'll just do some
5-minute
quick
update.
highlights.
Bam,
That did
bam.
not work out.
Be like 1920s fast-talking journalists.
Patrick was like, I don't know if I can be on camera either. And I was like, look, Patrick, I'm not going to comb my hair, so it'll be fine. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we keep our promises.
Mostly. Mostly. Anyway, Merry Christmas, everybody. And we haven't set the date for our return, but we'll tell you as fast as we can. And of course, if Patrick has some compelling breaking education news between now and the end of the year, we can pop back in and do a quick, very, very special edition of Cayman.
Yep.
Edbeat. I was going to say Cayman Current's Edbeat, but then I was like, wait, no, it's Cayman Life and Cayman Current. I don't know. So yeah, maybe.
Well,
Patrick's like, what is she doing? All right, hang on.
Is the year over yet?
It's not over yet. Anyway, Patrick, thank you so much. It's been great. And I do encourage everybody to check out caymancurrent.org. There's tons of good stuff on there all the time. And not only, if you haven't checked it out, not only is it original reporting from Patrick and Kayla, but also really good roundup of some of the other things that are going on, making headlines locally. And he takes a look at education stuff, internationally as well. So there's really a lot there. And if you're a parent or an educator or even a student for that matter, it's definitely worth adding this to your RSS feed. Because I'm a nerd. It is. It's very good. And I really appreciate the work you're doing. And I know that lots of other people do too. So thank you so much for doing this, Patrick. I know it's not always the easiest thing to do a startup like this, but more power to you for it.
Yeah. Thanks, April.
All right. Merry Christmas, everybody. I'm going to roll the other beautiful bean footage, which if you still don't know about, Bush's baked beans, you'll see.
Now you know.